So this is Delta 55. The plane is gradually but perceptibly descending. It is barely light outside and we aren't due at Orly until nearly noon. There is an odd ticking noise coming from the wing outside my window. I come fully awake and realize we are listing strenuously to the right. I glance at my seatmate on the aisle. Her name is Rebecca. She is a 26-year-old bank teller from Cincinnati who has never flown before, who has saved for 5 years to take her dream trip to Paris. I spent most of dinner telling her how much safer airplanes are than car travel, how the 777 has a minimum of 3 fail-safes on each of its major systems, how even if one of the engines fell clean off the fuselage, it is designed to tumble backwards, up and over the wing, so it doesn't tear the wing from the plane. Now, in spite of all my reassurances, we seem to be heading shoulder first into the North Atlantic. Ladies and gentlemen, the pilot says, as many of you are probably aware, we are descending, preparing to make an unscheduled landing into Reykjavik, Iceland. Approximately 35 minutes ago, we experienced an explosion in our number 2 engine, and that engine is now inoperable. The ticking sound you hear is the wind running through it, spinning the blades backwards, much like a household fan. You can probably also tell that we are tacking toward Iceland, much as we would in a sailboat, as our current engine configuration will not give us full power in a straight line. Now Rebecca is awake and looking at me wild-eyed. The man likes a metaphor, I say, and offer a small smile. The light out the window has strengthened, and I can see whitecaps on an angry gray sea. I always kind of wanted to go to Iceland, I say, but by now Rebecca is no longer looking at me. She has her eyes closed tightly, has given herself, I imagine, to prayer. We will be landing in approximately 15 minutes, the captain says. Please give your undivided attention to the flight attendants as they instruct you in landing in the brace position. I like that he did not say crash. I like that he is a language guy. The ocean is getting quite a bit closer, no sign of Iceland out my window, and I hope that Reykjavik Airport does not turn out to be a metaphor for fucked. Just when it seems that our wheels have to be skimming the water, land and runway lights appear, and then more of them. So many lights it's hard to count them. A sea of spinning red and blue. Every ambulance and fire truck in Iceland seems to have come out to greet us. Holy shit, I say, just before the wheels hit the foam and the foam splashes up and covers all the windows, throwing the cabin in a half-light, exactly like waking up in a tent after a snowstorm, and then everyone is cheering as the plane glides to a jerky, sticky stop. Much later, in an upstairs blank space of terminal, as we are being fed rice with some kind of yellow chickeny goo all over it by something resembling the Icelandic Red Cross, the crew tells us the reason for the emergency equipment. When the number 2 engine exploded, it spit jet fuel all over the fuselage. We were a Molotov cocktail hurtling through space, is the way the literary pilot puts it. There was no way to be certain that the friction of the tires on the runway wouldn't make a spark and ignite us, turn us into a 90-mile-per-hour ball of flame. This is chapter 25, Ban Giang Hai, Laos. My guide Zai and I are standing in the warm mist of a Mekong River morning in the village of Ban Giang Hai, Laos, watching an unusually tall Laotian tend his boiling vats of Lao Lao, the rice wine moonshine that has put his village on the map. Monkeys scream in the trees above us, and a gentle-faced woman stands nearby, holding a glass I fear is meant for me. It is slightly after 8 a.m., and in America that would be good enough reason to decline politely, but here in Laos, where decorum is far more rigorous and complicated than it is in America, I'm pretty sure there isn't going to be a way out of drinking the pickled Mekong water that is about to come from the steaming, rusted 50-gallon drum. I reassure myself that no self-respecting amoeba could possibly live in 80-proof hooch, and quickly down the glass of white I am offered, which gets me another glass, and then a glass of red, which I realize the second it goes down my throat without searing my tonsils isn't nearly as strong as the white. I am seized with regret, flooded by premonitions of feverish vomiting in a Laotian healthcare facility. I do what any sophisticated world traveler would do and stuff an entire antibacterial wipe into my mouth, and during the tour of the brightly painted temple, suck every drop of juice out of it I can and swallow. Outside the temple, a beautiful woman is making ferns and bougainvillea and daisy petals out of colored paper. I buy a small bouquet from her and ask if I can take her picture. She says something to Zai and he translates. She says she should take your picture because you are the beautiful one. And I can tell by the tone in his voice that he thinks she is mistaken. Zai is the most formal guide I've ever had in Asia, which is saying a great deal. He had been a monk for 3 months at 18, then he became one again for one day last year when his mother died, so he could carry her body, he says, to the other side. His English is impeccable, except that he says electric city when he means electricity, and comfort table when he means comfortable. And anyone can see why he would think that was correct. At least twice a day he says, if I am not speaking right, you will please graduate me, but I rarely do. I'm pretty sure I have managed to eat the antibacterial wipe clandestinely until we are back on the boat, heading downriver to the magical city of Luang Prabang, and Zai says, have I told you yet how the Buddha died? When I say no, he says, he was invited to the house of a friend for dinner and they were serving pak. Pak, I say? Pak, he says, mildly impatient with me as usual, and he makes an oinking noise in his throat. Ah, I say, and Zai smiles. He knew the pak was bad, Zai says, knew even that it would kill him, but he ate it anyway because it was most important not to offend his hosts. I guess that's the difference, I almost say, between Buddha and me, but on the off chance that Zai has paid me a compliment, I smile out at the muddy river and nod. Oh, I'm going to read this one, even though I wasn't planning to, just because it has the Mare Island Bridge in it. On the bridge over the river between Vallejo and Mare Island, I see something that at first I think are balls of colored paper, but on closer inspection turn out to be 3 tiny ducklings getting whisked along by the car-created wind, swept off their feet, really, between the concrete median and the single lane of non-stop traffic. To stop and help them would cause, at best, a 10-mile traffic jam, and at worst, an accident. And even if I decided to take the risk, to be sworn at, run over, bashed from behind, in what way might I help the ducklings that would not incite them to try to get away from me, running under the wheels of the cars that would inevitably try to get around me, plummeting to their death over the side of the bridge or flapping over the median into the oncoming traffic? I try to tell myself that eventually when night comes the traffic will slow, and those ducklings, if they are very smart and stay tight to the rail, if they are not dead under the wheels of a car or dehydrated to the point where their little duckling brains aren't functioning, will figure out how to get back from the top of the bridge to the marshland below and maybe even back to their neglectful mother duck. Far more likely, in the next 30 seconds, they will err in the other direction and get sucked up into the engine of a semi. I know beyond knowing that the memory of these 3 ducklings and my failure to save them will not fade. I fight down a momentary rage at whoever invented the word duckling in the first place. The word duckling belongs to a world in which smiling policemen drive out to the Mare Island Bridge and set up barricades, stopping traffic in both directions. A world in which those who have to wait 15 minutes behind the barricades are glad to do it, glad to have a story to tell when they get home about the successful return of the ducklings to the marsh. Over the years, my memory of those 3 scurrying creatures will become oddly cartoonish. Huey, Dewey, and Louie, wearing little sailor suits, running just ahead of the tires, then veering warily together off the concrete median. I won't ask myself how I might be using this portion of brain space if I were not feeling sad and ineffectual in regard to the ducklings. I will be certain only that this is not the world in which the word duckling belongs. This This is 59, Tucson, Arizona. I have not been on the property 30 minutes when I am lying on a massage table in a softly lit frangipani scented room with a person named Trevor towering over me. I can see, Trevor says, that you are doing a lot of spiritual work because look how far you are out in your hair. His accent is vaguely South African, and he has the most impressive unibrow I have ever seen. I do not read poetry, Trevor says, because I live poetry. He picks my feet up and lets them fall back to the table. May I ask you, he says, why the lower half of your body is perpetually standing in ice-cold water? He means energetically, of course, because the room is warm and my legs are dry. And what happened here, he asks, not waiting for an answer. He has his hand on my leg at the exact place where, when I was 4 years old, my father threw me so hard against a big oak wardrobe that I broke my femur. The bone healed 40 years ago. I was casted from the tip of my toes to my armpits for months. But Trevor is not the first healer to be able to see what happened. My father, I begin. I am not afraid of your pain, Trevor says. I am not afraid of your grief. I am not afraid of your terror. You want to know why I'm not afraid of your terror? I nod. I am not afraid of your terror because I have gone inside the monster, and inside the monster is pure wonder. Somewhere in this building, my friend Willow, who I have come to Canyon Ranch with, is getting a nice, simple lavender scrub and an herbal wrap. Willow looked through the catalog, thought, yeah, the first night, maybe a nice herbal wrap after all that travel. Pamela, Trevor says, will you tell me your father's name so that I may ask him to excuse himself from the lower half of your body? Yes, I say, and I do. Sebastian, Trevor says. Sebastian, you must get out of there. Sebastian, he says, this does not belong to you. He has his eyes closed and his hands tight around my ankles. No, Sebastian, he says, more forcefully now. There are no options. We stay like that for an excruciating amount of time. Then he folds my hands across my chest and covers them with his. If you could have only one thing, he says, would you choose peace or ecstasy? Ecstasy, I think, though I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to say peace. Peace is an illusion, Trevor says. I am in the ecstasy nearly all the time now, even when I sleep. I think of the composer's lonely bedroom, the terrible black sheets, the clock radio projecting blood-red digits onto the ceiling, his bald head, a glinting Cabernet color like someone already dead. Pamela, Trevor says, slapping the bottom of my feet with his palms. Yes, sir, I say, out of habit. He's got my wrists now, is stretching them back over my head. No one has ever called me Pamela except my father. You have two glasses, Trevor says. One is completely full and one is completely empty. In which glass is stillness possible? The full one, I say. The questions are getting easier. Trevor now has his powerful thumbs wrapped almost completely around my uppermost vertebrae. You can get to stillness through ecstasy, he says, but you can't get to ecstasy through stillness. I think about all the ways the language of the New Age is custom-made for terrorism. I think about when a pink mouth opened in a white sky over Davis and I saw for the second time the cupped waiting hands. When one of the doing lines in your life intersects with the circle of your now, Trevor says, what happens? It has to bend, I say, confident. It bends and eventually becomes a circle. Precisely, he says, and releases his death grip on my neck. This is 80, Portland, Oregon. Rick says, Pam, if everybody deserved a down pillow, there wouldn't be any more birds. This is 111, Trenton, New Jersey. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that my back hurt so much because when I was 4 and in my 3/4 body cast, my mother found it easiest to carry me around upside down like a monkey, using the plaster bar the doctors had fashioned between my knees to keep them for 3.5 months the correct distance apart. And let's say she did just that. until my second to last appointment when the orthopedic surgeon said, "You haven't been carrying her around by this bar, have you?" And my mother shot one quick glance at my father and said, "Of course not, no." And it became a funny story the two of them liked to tell together to friends over a couple of drinks. And let's say that when their friends asked, as of course they would, how in the name of heaven a 4-year-old breaks her femur, they said that I had somehow managed to pull the giant wardrobe over onto myself. Except instead of wardrobe, they would have said credenza, because it would have made us sound richer than we were. I still don't see how it would make me feel any better to think of the pain in my hip and spine as anything other than my most loyal and valuable companion. The continuous non-voice in my ear that says, "You got out alive and you still get to go." No two people who have ever lived love to travel more than my mother and father. They gave that love, in their fashion, to me.